Ambassador Elena Torres had served humanity for 40 years. She had negotiated trade deals with species who ate through their skin. She had prevented wars with words alone. She had earned the respect of the Galactic Assembly through patience, wisdom, and an unshakable calm. But now, standing before the council chamber, she felt that calm beginning to crack. 3 years had passed since the Korvax Dominion first tested humanity's borders. 3 years of slow, deliberate pressure. First came the mining colony on the edge of human space. The Korvax simply claimed it. They said the treaty lines were old and needed redrawing. Earth protested. The Assembly debated. Nothing changed. Then came the trade route. Korvax warships blockaded the Valoris corridor, stopping human merchant vessels and turning them back. Goods rotted. Families went hungry on frontier worlds. Earth protested again. The Assembly formed a committee to study the issue. The Korvax ambassador smiled and said nothing. Then came the science outpost on Kalen 5. 300 researchers. Biologists studying deep space fungal life. No military value. No strategic importance. A Korvax destroyer entered the system, fired once, and left. 300 humans died in the vacuum of space. Elena remembered watching the transmission from Kalen 5. The last image before the feed cut was a woman named Dr. Myra Solis, holding a data slate, her eyes wide as the alarm screamed behind her. Elena had met Myra once. She had been kind. She had laughed easily. Now she was dust. Earth responded with diplomatic protests. Again. The assembly chambers were vast, a great ring of seats rising toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Hundreds of species watched from their pods. Some looked bored. Some looked nervous. The Korvax sat at the center, their delegation tall and armored, their faces hidden behind polished metal masks. Their ambassador, a being called Vorith, leaned back in his seat with the confidence of someone who had never lost anything. Elena stepped forward. Her voice was steady. I stand before this assembly with evidence of unprovoked aggression by the Korvax Dominion. The destruction of the Kalen 5 outpost was an act of war. 300 civilians are dead. We demand the Korvax be held accountable. We demand the assembly enforce its own laws. She activated the holographic display. Images of the destroyed outpost floated in the air. The twisted metal. The frozen bodies. The data showed the Korvax ship's approach, its weapons discharge, its unhurried departure. The assembly stirred. Some species murmured. But no one stood. No one spoke. Vorith rose from his seat. His voice came through his mask speaker, cold and amused. The humans speak of aggression. Yet they forget that strength is the only law the galaxy respects. Your people are soft. You negotiate when you should fight. You protest when you should act. The outpost was in contested space. We removed a threat. If the humans wish to avoid further incidents, they should withdraw from the frontier entirely. Elena felt her hands curl into fists. She forced them to relax. Contested space. The treaty signed 300 years ago defines that system as human territory. The assembly ratified it. Your own government signed it. Vorith waved a hand. Treaties change. The weak do not get to keep what the strong desire. The assembly remained silent. Elena looked around the chamber. She saw fear in the eyes of the smaller species. She saw calculation in the eyes of the larger ones. No one would help. No one ever helped when the Korvax took what they wanted. She took a breath. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice was different. Harder. Humanity has been patient. We have followed the laws. We have sought peace. We have allowed this assembly to deliberate while our people died. But patience has limits. She turned to face Vorith directly. We have held back because we chose peace. We chose it deliberately. We chose it knowing that there would be those who mistook our restraint for weakness. But peace requires two willing parties. You are not willing. And so I give you this warning, not as a threat, but as a statement of fact. She paused. The chamber was completely silent now. If you push us further, we will stop holding back. And when that happens, you will understand why the old empires of this galaxy always taught their children one rule. Do not wake the sleeping giant. For a moment, no one moved. Then Vorith laughed. It was a harsh, mechanical sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Other delegations joined him. The laughter spread, a wave of mockery that filled the great hall. Vorith leaned forward, his mask gleaming. What could your soft species possibly unleash? You have no armies. No fleets worth mentioning. You spend your time building gardens and writing poetry. You are children playing at civilization. And children who misbehave must be taught a lesson. Elena did not laugh. She did not argue. She simply looked at him with eyes that had seen 40 years of diplomacy, 20 years of watching the galaxy change, and 3 years of watching her people die. "You have no idea what we buried," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the laughter continued. But some of the older delegations, the ones who remembered the old empires, the ones who had heard the stories passed down through generations, did not laugh. They sat in silence, and they wondered what exactly humanity had hidden in the dark. 6 months passed. The laughter from the assembly chamber had faded, but the Korvax had not forgotten their contempt for humanity. They had only grown bolder. The fleet that descended upon New Eden was the largest the Korvax had ever assembled for a single target. 300 warships, their hulls black and sharp, filled the sky above the garden world. New Eden was a jewel among human colonies. Blue oceans, green fields, 12 million people who had built a life far from Earth. The Korvax expected surrender within hours. They had crushed stronger species with less force. But the humans on New Eden did something unexpected. They fought. The colony's defenses were better than the Korvax had anticipated. Ground-based cannons rose from the fields. Civilian ships armed themselves and flew straight at the invaders. The fighting dragged on for days, then weeks. The Korvax commander, a brutal strategist named General Vex, grew impatient. He had expected a quick victory. Instead, he was losing ships to farmers and teachers who had never held a weapon before. On the 23rd day of the siege, Vex made a decision. He ordered orbital bombardment. The warships moved into position. Their weapons powered up. Below, on the surface of New Eden, 12 million people looked up at the sky and saw death falling toward them. The bombardment lasted one night. When the sun rose, New Eden was silent. The cities were gone. The fields were ash. The oceans boiled. 12 million humans, every man, woman, and child on the planet, were dead. The last transmission from the surface was a single image. A child's hand reaching toward a camera. Then static. On Earth, General Marcus Thorne sat in his office at 3:47 in the morning. The secure line had buzzed with the news 10 minutes ago. He had watched the footage from New Eden's orbital sensors. He had seen the colony go dark, one sector at a time. He had seen the child's hand. He did not cry. He did not shout. He sat in silence for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone. "It's time," he said. Across Earth, the morning came like any other. People woke up. They made coffee. They went to work. Then the news broke. The images from New Eden spread across every screen. The ash. The silence. The child's hand. Grief hit first. Cities held vigils. People wept in the streets. But grief did not last. It turned into something else. Something older. Something humanity had tried very hard to forget. By noon, protests filled every major city. But these were not protests calling for peace. They were not calling for diplomacy. They were calling for something darker. The crowds did not carry signs that said "Stop the war." They carried signs that said "Remember New Eden." They carried signs that said "Unleash us." And in the depths of the planet, in places most humans did not know existed, doors began to open. Beneath the Rocky Mountains, a facility sealed for 200 years hummed with power for the first time. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, a vault the size of a city unsealed its locks. Beneath the Antarctic ice, machines that had not moved since humanity's darkest days began to wake. Humanity had not always been peaceful. In their past, they had been something else. They had been warriors. They had been killers. They had built weapons so terrible that they had almost destroyed themselves. And after centuries of blood, they had made a choice. They had buried their weapons. They had dismantled their war machines. They had chosen to become something better. But they had never destroyed the weapons. They had only hidden them. Because somewhere, deep in their collective memory, they had always known that the day might come when they would need to remember what they used to be. That day had arrived. On the assembly station, Ambassador Vorath sat in his quarters, pleased with himself. New Eden was gone. The humans would surrender now. They always surrendered. They were soft. They were weak. They were. His communication console beeped. A priority message from Earth. He activated it, expecting another plea for mercy, another desperate diplomat begging for peace. Instead, he saw a face he did not recognize. A man in a dark uniform, his jaw hard, his eyes cold. There was no fear in his face. No desperation. There was only a flat, quiet certainty. "You were warned," the man said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of 12 million dead. You were given every chance. You chose to believe our kindness was weakness. It was not weakness. It was restraint. That restraint is now over. The screen went dark. Vorath sat in silence for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but he told himself it was confidence. What could the humans do? They had no fleet. No army. They were nothing. Across the galaxy, humanity began to move. Ships that had been buried for 2 centuries rose from the oceans. Soldiers who had been trained in secret emerged from underground bunkers. Weapons that had been locked away in vaults were loaded into launch bays. The galaxy had not seen humanity angry in 200 years. They had forgotten what it looked like. They were about to remember. The Korvax war machine had never lost. They had conquered a third of the galaxy. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. Their soldiers were bred in cloning vats, born for battle, knowing nothing else. They had crushed empires that had stood for 10,000 years. They had never known defeat. They learned. Humanity did not fight like any enemy the Korvax had faced before. There were no declarations of war, no formal battle lines, no honorable duels between fleets. The humans fought like a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other before they ever left their home world. They fought like they had been waiting for this moment. The first sign came 3 days after the broadcast from General Thorne. A Korvax supply convoy, carrying food and ammunition to the front lines, simply stopped transmitting. When a scout ship went to investigate, they found nothing. No wreckage. No debris. The ships were gone as if they had never existed. The silent fleet had awakened. They were unlike anything the Korvax had ever seen. Ships with no crews. No life support. No quarters for sleeping or eating. Just engines, weapons, and a neural link that connected each vessel to a single human commander sitting in a bunker on Earth. The commander could see through the ship's sensors, feel its damage, move it faster than any pilot could react. And because there were no crew, there was no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. The silent fleet struck again and again. Convoy after convoy vanished. Patrols disappeared. The Korvax sent ships to investigate, and those ships never returned. The humans did not announce their attacks. They did not claim victory. They simply erased everything the Korvax sent into human space. Then came the Eclipse Protocol. The Korvax supply lines were the backbone of their empire. They stretched across hundreds of systems, a web of routes that fed their fleets and supplied their armies. The humans did not attack the supply ships. They attacked the space around them. The Eclipse Protocol was not a weapon that destroyed ships. It was a weapon that destroyed the fabric of space itself. It collapsed gravity wells. It twisted navigation routes into impossible knots. Star systems that had been connected for millennia suddenly found themselves cut off. The Korvax supply lines, so carefully built over centuries, vanished in a single night. Fleets ran out of fuel. Soldiers ran out of food. The great Korvax war machine began to starve. But the worst was yet to come. They called themselves the Ghosts. Human soldiers who had volunteered for something no one else would do. They underwent a procedure that removed something fundamental from their minds. The ability to feel fear. The ability to feel pain. The ability to feel mercy. They were not superhuman. They did not move faster or hit harder. They simply never stopped. The Ghosts boarded Korvax ships. They came through airlocks and hull breaches and maintenance tunnels. They came in darkness and silence. The Korvax had faced brave enemies before. They had faced desperate enemies. They had never faced an enemy that did not understand the concept of surrender. An enemy that kept walking forward while taking fire. An enemy that did not scream when wounded. An enemy that simply kept coming until nothing was left standing. The Korvax soldiers, bred for war, raised to fight, broke. They had never faced something that could not be broken. They threw down their weapons. They fled. They begged. The Ghosts did not stop. They could not stop. That was the horror of them. In 6 months, humanity pushed the Korvax back to their home system. 6 months of war that had lasted longer than any war in Korvax history. Their fleets were shattered. Their soldiers were broken. Their empire, built on the belief that strength was everything, had been destroyed by a species they had called soft. The Galactic Assembly watched in stunned silence. The species that had laughed at Elena Torres, that had whispered about human weakness, that had done nothing while New Eden burned, now begged the humans to stop. They pleaded for mercy. They offered anything. Everything. General Thorne appeared before the assembly for the first time. His face was hard. His eyes were tired. "You asked what we had buried," he said. Now you know. We buried the thing we became when we had no other choice. We buried it because we wanted to be better. We wanted to be peaceful. We wanted to be kind. You mistook that kindness for weakness. You were wrong. He looked at the Korvax ambassador, who sat in silence, his armor cracked, his pride gone. We are not monsters. But we have monsters inside us. And when you killed 12 million of our people, you woke them up. Remember this. Remember what happens when you push humanity too far. Because we will bury them again. We will try to be better again. But if you make us wake them a second time, we will not stop at your home system. He turned and walked out. The assembly did not laugh this time. They sat in silence, and they remembered. Core Prime was a fortress world. 10,000 years of military tradition had turned it into the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Orbital defense platforms ringed it like a belt of steel. Ground-based cannons could strike any ship that came within 1,000,000 kilometers. And above it all, the Korvax home fleet waited. 10,000 warships. The finest soldiers. The strongest commanders. They had never lost a battle on their own soil. The humans sent 40 ships. Fleet Commander Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the approach on his display. 40 tiny dots moving through the void toward his armada. He laughed. His officers laughed with him. 40 ships against 10,000. It was not a battle. It was a funeral. They have lost their minds, Vex said. Perhaps the grief for New Eden broke them. His second nodded. Shall we destroy them, Commander? Vex waved a hand. Let them come closer. I want them to see what they are facing before they die. I want them to understand their mistake. The 40 human ships moved steadily forward. They did not scatter. They did not take evasive action. They flew in perfect formation, a single arrow pointing toward Core Prime. On the lead ship, Commander Sarah Vance sat in her neural-link chair, her eyes closed, her mind connected to the silent fleet that waited in the darkness beyond the system. She felt no fear. She had trained for this moment her entire life. The Korvax hailed her ship. She accepted the channel. Vex's face appeared on her screen, his metal mask gleaming, his voice filled with contempt. Human, you have come to die. Is this your great revenge? 40 ships against the might of the Korvax Dominion. Sarah opened her eyes. She looked at him calmly. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. We told you to stop pushing. We told you what would happen. You did not believe us. Now you will understand what we have always known. War is not strength. War is failure. And those who choose it must face the consequences. Vex's laughter filled the bridge. Pretty words. They will not save you. He cut the channel. Sarah did not move. She waited until her ships were in position. Then she gave the order. Activate Eclipse Protocol. Target the star. The 40 ships opened their drives. But this time, they did not target supply lines. They did not target ships. They reached past the fleet, past the defense platforms, past the planet itself. They reached into the heart of the Korvax system, into the star that had burned for billions of years. And they stopped it. There was no explosion. No burst of light. The star simply ceased. The fusion reaction that powered it, that held it burning against its own gravity, stopped. The light began to fade. Slowly at first, then faster. Core Prime, a world that had never known darkness, began to dim. On the surface, the Korvax looked up and saw their sun dying. Panic spread through the cities. The temperature began to drop. 3 days, the humans had said. In 3 days, the planet would freeze. In a week, it would be uninhabitable. Vex stared at his displays in horror. Stop them, he screamed. Destroy those ships. The Korvax home fleet surged forward. 10,000 warships, the pride of the Dominion, threw themselves at 40 human vessels. Weapons fire filled the void. Missiles streaked through the darkness. The humans did not flinch. From the darkness beyond the system, the silent fleet emerged. They had been waiting. Hundreds of ships, each one controlled by a single human commander, each one carrying no crew, no fear, no hesitation. They moved with perfect coordination, a swarm of death that fell upon the Korvax fleet like a blade. Korvax ships exploded by the hundreds. Their commanders, trained for generations in glorious battle, could not understand what they were facing. The human ships did not fight with honor. They did not line up for broadsides. They struck from every angle, targeted engines first, then weapons, then command decks. They fought with cold, mathematical efficiency. Every shot counted. Every move was calculated. Within 12 hours, half the Korvax fleet was gone. Within 18, the defense platforms were silent. Within 24, the home fleet was shattered. Thousands of ships drifted in the void, their crews dead or dying. The 40 human ships, the ones that had started it all, had not lost a single vessel. Core Prime hung in the darkness. Its star was cold. Its people faced extinction. The great Korvax Dominion, masters of a third of the galaxy, conquerors of 100 species, had been brought to its knees by the soft, weak humans they had mocked. Across the galaxy, every screen lit up with the face of General Marcus Thorne. He stood before a simple black background. His uniform was dark. His face was the face of a man who had done terrible things. There was no triumph in his eyes. There was only the weight of what he had ordered. "This is what we buried," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the galaxy. "This is what we chose to forget so we could become something better. We built weapons that could end stars. We built soldiers that could not be stopped. We built a machine of war so terrible that we swore never to use it again. We buried it deep. We tried to become peaceful. We tried to become kind." He paused. His jaw tightened. "You forced us to remember. You laughed at our warnings. You killed 12 million of our people because you thought we were weak. Now you see the truth. We were never weak. We were choosing to be better. And now that choice is gone." He looked directly into the camera, and the galaxy felt the weight of his gaze. The galaxy will never forget what happens when you push humanity too far. Remember New Eden. Remember what you did. And remember what we did in return. Because next time, we will not stop at one star. The screen went dark. On Core Prime, the people huddled in the cold and waited to see if the humans would let them live. The Korvax surrendered without conditions. There were no celebrations on Earth. No parades. No victory speeches. The streets were quiet. The flags flew at half-mast. 12 million names were carved into a wall of black stone, and every day, people came to stand before it and remember. The victory felt hollow. 200 years of peace had been shattered. The weapons that had been buried for generations were now unearthed, and humanity looked at them and wondered if they could ever be put back. Ambassador Elena Torres had survived. When the Korvax occupied the assembly station, she had hidden in a maintenance tunnel for 3 weeks. She had lived on ration bars and recycled water. She had listened to the Korvax soldiers marching above her, searching for anyone who had not fled. She had survived, but something in her had changed. The softness was gone. In its place was something harder, something that had seen too much. Now she returned to the galactic stage. But she did not return as a petitioner. She did not come asking for help or pleading for justice. She came as the representative of the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. The species who had laughed at her warnings now sat in silence, waiting to hear their fate. The assembly met in a new chamber. The old one had been destroyed in the fighting. The new hall was smaller, simpler. There were no grand decorations, no towering statues. Just a circle of seats and a single platform at the center. Elena walked to the platform slowly. Her steps echoed in the silence. She looked at the assembled species. The Korvax delegation sat in a corner, their armor cracked, their heads bowed. The other species, the ones who had done nothing while New Eden burned, could not meet her eyes. She let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was tired. The years of diplomacy, the months of war, the weeks in a maintenance tunnel had worn her down. But her voice was also strong. Stronger than it had ever been. "We did not want this. We chose peace. We chose diplomacy. We chose to be better than our past. For 200 years, we sat in this assembly and worked to build something greater than ourselves. We made alliances. We signed treaties. We helped species in need. And you called us weak." She paused. Her eyes moved across the chamber, meeting the gaze of each delegation. "You let the Korvax slaughter 12 million of our people. You watched them destroy New Eden. You watched them burn our colony to ash. And you did nothing. Because you thought we would not fight. Because you thought we were soft. Because you thought we deserved what was coming." Her voice hardened. "We proved you wrong. We showed you what we buried. We showed you what we become when we have no other choice. And now you are afraid of us. You should be." She let the words hang in the air. The assembly shifted in their seats. Some species looked ready to flee. Others looked ready to beg. Elena raised her hand. "But we do not want your fear. We never wanted it. What we want is simple. We want a galaxy where peace is not a joke. Where diplomacy is not ignored. Where the strong do not simply take from the weak because they can. That is what we wanted 200 years ago. That is what we still want today. She took a breath. We are not going to rule you. We are not going to conquer you. We are going to protect you. Not because you deserve it. Not because you earned it. Because we refuse to become the monsters you thought we were. The weapons we unleashed will be buried again. The silent fleet will go dark. The ghosts will come home. We will try to be better again. And we will keep trying, no matter how many times the galaxy forces us to remember what we are capable of. She extended her hand toward the assembly. Join us. Not as subjects. Not as enemies. As partners. Help us build a galaxy where no one has to bury their weapons because no one dares to push. Help us build a galaxy where peace is not a joke. Or refuse, and face a future where humanity is always watching. Always waiting. Always ready to wake up again. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of choice. One by one, the species of the assembly rose to their feet. The Kith were first. Then the Tellarine. Then the smaller species, the ones who had suffered under the Korvax for generations. They stood and bowed their heads in acceptance. The larger species followed. Even the Korvax, broken and humbled, rose and offered their surrender. The new galactic accord was formed that day. Humanity sat at its center, but not as tyrants. As guardians. The weapons were buried again. The silent fleet went dark. The ghosts came home and tried to remember how to feel. It was not easy. Some of them never learned. But they tried. On Earth, General Marcus Thorne stood before the memorial wall. 12 million names carved into black stone. He had ordered the attack on the Korvax star. He had watched the fleet shatter. He had carried the weight of every death, human and Korvax alike. Now he placed his hand on the cold stone and closed his eyes. We told them to stop pushing, he whispered. Next time, they will listen. Behind him, the sun rose over a world that had proven once again that peace was not the absence of strength. It was the choice to use it only when there was no other option. And humanity, as always, chose to be better. Even when it was hard. Even when it hurt. Even when the galaxy did not deserve it. That was who they were. That was who they had always been. And that was who they would always try to be.